This is not getting discussed on the mainstream media. Not only are they wrong legally, but the fact that they would do this is outrageous. This is an overreaction and really nonsense. How would you react if this was your son or your daughter? It's the offense of knowing the truth. It's the offense of having an alternate worldview. Saying God bless you to someone is not a violation of the law. Welcome to the broadcast, everyone. The United States Senate taking action in defense of Israel, which is some very good news. I'm holding in my hand a Senate concurrent resolution dealing with protecting Israel and rejecting what President Obama said regarding both the 67 borders and forcing Israel into a situation they will be basically forced to negotiate with Hamas. So the good news is the Senate's taking action. We're going to be joined, by the way, a little bit later in the broadcast by Senator Orrin, primary sponsor of this resolution.
Yeah, and this resolution, I mean, you can't be any clearer than this. Resolved by the Senate, the House of Representatives concurring that, one, it is the policy of the United States to support and facilitate Israel in creating and maintaining secure, recognized, and defensible borders, and two, it is contrary to United States policy and our national security to have the borders of Israel return to the boundaries of 1949 or 1967.
You could not be clear, but you got to ask yourself, how do we get in this situation? Well, the reason we got in this situation was because President Obama compelled the Israeli government to negotiate with Hamas to return to 67 borders, which means a divided Jerusalem, and basically, and this is pre-67 borders, remember, which puts all the holy sites outside of the control of the Israelis, which would be devastating for those of us that enjoy going to those holy sites in Israel, both the Jewish community, Christian community as well. So now the Senate, Republicans and Democrats, Jordan, I think it's important to point out here, this is getting wide bipartisan support.
You know, all the hoopla surrounding, really, Prime Minister Netanyahu's visit only happened because of President Obama's speech. The first speech that he gave when he was speaking to the Muslim world again mentioned 1967 borders, mentioned occupation, didn't define what that meant until a later speech, which forced Prime Minister Netanyahu's hand into making a very hardline speech to the Congress, something he didn't have to do. The whole issue, once Hamas joined that unity government, we shouldn't even be debating whether or not we're going to enter into a peace negotiations right now, whether Israel can do that and the U.S. can step outside and help negotiate. There's no way Israel can sit down at a table across from people who say that they want to kill Jews wherever they find them in their charter, which is exactly what Prime Minister Netanyahu said.
We're going to go ahead in a moment and be joined by Senator Orrin, who's the sponsor of this resolution. But let me play for you soundbite number 5. This is President Obama demanding a return to the 67 borders. Take a listen.
We believe the borders of Israel and Palestine should be based on the 1967 lines with mutually agreed swaps, so that secure and recognized borders are established for both states.
When you talk about the 1967 borders, remember what you're talking about. First of all, those weren't borders. Those were armistice lines after a conflict where the Arab army surrendered, basically, number one. Number two, you're talking about dividing Jerusalem, which is something we shouldn't allow. Now, here's what we're doing. We are mobilizing you to take action. We want you to stand with Israel, stand with the Israeli government, stand with the Israeli people. Say, we're not going to fund Hamas. We don't want Israel being forced to negotiate with Hamas. We don't want to see a divided Jerusalem or a return to the 67 borders. We have a great petition that's going to the Israeli government and going to the President of the United States. When you sign that petition, by the way, we're going to send you the export. Jordan's going to give you the information, but I want to encourage everybody right now. We really need to see people take action.
Yeah, it's a time to stand for Israel, building up to what's going to be happening at the United Nations in the fall. So we've got time period to organize as Christians around the country and the world. Call now and join this petition to stand for Israel, 877-989-2255. It's about keeping Jerusalem united. You want your grandchildren to see those holy sites? You need to stand with Israel today. 877-989-2255 or aclj.org.
President Obama siding with the Palestinian Authority, turning his back on Israel. Unbelievable. President Obama calling Israel an occupying force, demanding that Israel revert to the 1967 borders, a move that would divide Jerusalem. What's worse, President Obama, by backing the Palestinian Authority, is backing Hamas, a terrorist organization that vows to eliminate Israel. This is not a pathway to peace, it's an assault against Israel, our most important ally. We're sending a message to President Obama. This anti-Israel Israel tactic is unacceptable. Stand with the ACLJ in support of the nation of Israel and in opposition to President Obama's troubling new policy against Israel. Add your name to our petition now, and we'll send you 2 valuable resources: the Export DVD, a powerful look at the Middle East crisis, and a booklet on the growing threat of Sharia law. Tell President Obama it's time to stand with Israel. Call now, 1-877-989-2255 or online aclj.org.
Well, as I mentioned at the beginning of the broadcast, we're very fortunate to have a very good friend, someone that is leading on so many issues. But right now on the issue for Israel and what's going on with the president's initiative, that is Senator Orrin Hatch. And Senator, it's always good to be with you, and thanks for being back with us.
Well, it's really great to be with you, Jay, and I appreciate all that you folks do. You really do a good job.
Thank you very much, Senator. Let me ask you this. We've handled a lot of issues over the years. This one is getting really close to home. We have an office in Jerusalem. We do a lot of work. I'm handling a matter at the International Criminal Court, defending Israel's interests. But this is a whole new dimension. First, your reaction when the president made the statement about the 1967 borders, returning to those borders.
When I heard that statement, I was absolutely astounded. I couldn't believe that a president of the United States would make a comment like that, knowing that the Palestinians have never even come close to accepting the right of Israel to exist, and knowing that they've never offered one doggone thing as far as peace is concerned, and that he is basically saying, or he basically said, that Israel should cede land without any basis for saying that. And putting Israel, it would put Israel in a tremendously defensive position, and vulnerable position. I had a rough time believing it. I thought, am I hearing right here?
You know, it was interesting you say that, because we actually have in our office in Jerusalem, a couple of our lawyers from here are over in Jerusalem right now. And they, Israeli Air Force personnel, flew them over border areas to show what the borders would look like if you went to the pre-67 borders, and what things would look like. You've got portions of Israel that would be 9 miles wide.
Well,
I mean, defenseless.
It'd be a blip on an airplane. In fact, it's a blip in a car. Yeah. The fact of the matter is that it would be, as the Prime Minister said, indefensible and unacceptable for Israel to agree to something like that, and to be put into a defensive posture when they're the ones that have been open to negotiations, open to sitting down and talking about it, and open to trying to resolve all the difficulties. And the other side has not even recognized the right to exist. Now, there are good Palestinians who would like to do that. And they're the people who really ought to be negotiating with, not with, we ought to be negotiating with as well, and not
Hamas.
Not Hamas.
How do you react to that? I mean, the President of the United States asking the Israeli government to sit down. The President said I know there are problems, he said, with this. I don't know, how do you problem? You can't even, they won't recognize you. Not only would they not recognize your right to exist, they're calling for the extermination of Israel and Jews. I mean, they're very blatant about this.
You're right. They not only fight against the right of Israel to exist, they continually raise all kinds of problems with regard to Jerusalem, but they really basically are committed to destroying the people.
Yeah.
And that's not right either. And all I can say is this. I was astounded that an American president would do that. Now, to the president's credit, he's been backpedaling ever since, and I appreciate that. I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt.
Well, that's because people like you and others are putting pressure on him.
Well, that's right. But personally, how could any president of the United States do that to one of our most important allies in the world? There's a lot more to Israel than just being a little democracy in the Middle East and a sea of 300 million Arabs, who most of whom would like to get rid of Israel. But there are enough there, too, who realize that Israel's a sovereign state and ought to be recognized as such. And those are the people we ought to be negotiating with. But for him to say we got to go back to the 1967 borders or the 1949 borders or both, I mean, that's like saying, Israel, cut your throats.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact of the matter is that there's no way they could. Now, he said, well, I have to give the president credit for at least saying, well, that includes land swaps. Well,
whatever that means, right?
Whatever that means, and that doesn't mean much after you've basically given the high ground, and I'm speaking literally now, to the
when they go Golan Heights, sure.
Yeah, to the antagonists towards Israel.
Yeah.
It seems to me, Senator, that the speech that Prime Minister Netanyahu had to give, it was almost forced by President Obama, that he had to come into the United States on the floor of Congress and really take a hard line for Israel, which he knew would inflame the Middle East, the Muslim world, and some of the neighbors they are trying to work with doesn't make things necessarily easier. Do you think President Obama wanted that to happen? Do you think he wanted to make Israel have to take this hard line to the world? Was he trying to box in Prime Minister Netanyahu? He knew he was going to be here.
You know, I watched the remarks of the Prime Minister, who's been a longtime friend of mine.
Yes.
Has President Obama been a friend? And I watched his remarks in the Oval Office, and I was astounded myself because he made it very clear in a diplomatically acceptable way to me that this isn't going to happen. And the president's sitting right there with his hand on his chin, and to his credit, sat through the whole set of remarks. And I have to say, I've known Bibi Netanyahu, the prime minister, for many years. I have tremendous respect for him. I've had tremendous respect for every prime minister since Menachem Begin, including Menachem Begin. They've all been outstanding people to me, even though there have been different philosophies. But I don't know that you've ever had a better one than Bibi Netanyahu. He understands America as well as any Jewish prime minister, Israeli prime minister, and but he also understands Israel and their needs as well.
It was interesting that. Because I've known the Prime Minister also. We've met from offices. I've been in his office. I've been in the battlefield with him, literally, in Sderot and Ashkelon when rockets were coming in. He did take a very direct stand. Jordan, you wanted to follow that up, though. With
your time in the Senate, do you think the president, people are giving him this kind of benefit of the doubt that he didn't understand what he was saying? And there are some Democrat strategists saying he just didn't fully explain his first comments on Thursday, so he did on Sunday. Would he have ever given the Sunday speech if the reaction wasn't the reaction didn't happen to the Thursday speech?
Well, I suspect he would have because I guess he didn't realize what a reaction there would be. But, you know, all I can say is there are some people criticizing him for when he does speak off the cuff, when he doesn't have the monitors. In this case, he had the monitors.
Yeah.
And somebody wrote that speech for him.
And he approved it.
And he approved it. I know one thing, he wouldn't have given it without having read it. And anybody with the slightest modicum of brains would have realized that this was not what should be said. And it certainly was undermining the state of Israel, while not helping us with the moderate Arab people who we have to deal with, who we want to deal with, who we want to support.
Well, what's interesting about that, and I agree, Senator, is the moderate Arab leaders are as concerned about what's been put in motion here as we are, because you take a look at Jordan. They're looking at the situation saying the president's putting the whole country, the whole region into a difficult situation. Take it a step further, Hamas, now with their relationship with the Palestinian Authority, although there's now infighting with Hamas in between its most radical factions and its, if there is such a thing as a more moderate faction of Hamas, you've got all this internal fighting, yet we've got a domestic political issue now that's been created out of this. And you've responded with your friend Senator Joe Lieberman with the concurrent resolution. Let's talk about, first of all, what that resolution really gets to, and then let's talk about why. I mean, I absolutely support it. We all do. Did you ever think in all your years serving the people in the United States you'd ever have to get to this kind of statement, this direct, about an issue like this?
Well, I never thought so. We have a number of pregatory paragraphs. So let me just read the last one. Whereas Prime Minister of Israel Benjamin Netanyahu correctly stated on May 20th, 2011, that the 1967 lines were not, quote, boundaries of peace, they are the boundaries of repeated war, unquote. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Senate and the House of Representatives concurring that, 1, it is the policy of the United States to support and facilitate Israel in creating and maintaining secure, recognized, and defensible borders, and 2, it is contrary to United States policy and our national security to have the borders of Israel return to the boundaries of 1949 or 1967. Now, it's a way of just having everybody in Congress have to stand up and either support this or not. And I believe the vast majority will support it.
We've got a lot more to discuss with Senator Hatch, but as we get ready to get into this next segment of the broadcast, I want to encourage you, go to your phones, stand with Senator Hatch, stand with the members of the House and Senate, Republicans and Democrats that are standing with Israel. Here's the number to sign on that petition. Make sure Israel, Jerusalem stays its capital, eternally and undivided. And also no negotiation with Hamas, and certainly, as this resolution says, no return to the 67 borders, which makes Israel indefensible. Here's the number, 877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255. Now, you sign that petition. I'm going to send you the DVD, the export, as well as our booklet on Sharia law. Again, 877-989-2255 or aclj.org. Back with Senator Hatch in just a moment.
President Obama siding with the Palestinian Authority, turning his back on Israel. Unbelievable. President Obama calling Israel an occupying force, demanding that Israel revert to the 1967 borders, a move that would divide Jerusalem. What's worse, President Obama, by backing the Palestinian Authority, is backing Hamas, a terrorist organization that vows to eliminate Israel. This is not a pathway to peace, it's an assault against Israel, our most important ally. We're sending a message to President Obama. This anti-Israel tactic is unacceptable. Stand with the ACLJ in support of the nation of Israel and in opposition to President Obama's troubling new policy against Israel. Add your name to our petition now, and we'll send you 2 valuable resources: the Export DVD, a powerful look at the Middle East crisis, and a booklet on the growing threat of Sharia law. Tell President Obama it's time to stand with Israel. Call now, 1-877-989-2255 or online aclj.org.
Welcome back to the broadcast, everyone. Again, I want to encourage you to stay with us and stand with Israel and stand with Senator Hatch. We've had this important interview. I want to go right back to it with some more questions for the senator, but it really does set forth why we need to be standing with Israel right now. Senator?
The president has backed off of his original statement, but not as well as I'd like to see him back off. This basically says to the president, hey, back off, get with it, stand with American policy, don't play around with this. Let's work as hard as we can to bring the two sides together, and let's do it in good faith. But by gosh, don't put Israel in a tremendously jeopardous position by your remarks.
Right.
The fact is, the rest of the world listens to his remarks because of who he is and because of the position as President of the United States.
Well, we've already seen the Prime Minister of England, Cameron's already kind of repeated the 67 borders, and it looks like France is doing the same thing. So let's go to the second one. Let's read the second one.
Well, the second one is, whereas throughout its short history, Israel, a liberal democratic ally of the United States, has been repeatedly attacked by authoritarian regimes and terrorist organizations that denied its right to exist. That's true.
Yes, and let's start with the denying the right to exist. So the president says, that, as I mentioned earlier, that it's going to be problematic, he knows, for Netanyahu and the government in Israel to negotiate with these regimes. One of these regimes is calling for the destruction of Israel, and that's Hamas. How can we expect, what could be the possible political strategy, Senator, and you know this issue better than anybody I know, to do this? I mean, to put Israel in this kind of situation. It's not like you were just dealing with Fatah, the more moderate party. You're dealing with Hamas.
And Fatah was not easy to deal with either.
Exactly right.
Let's face it, under Arafat, I mean, it was
terrible.
It was terrible, too. In fact, the closest we ever came to an agreement was when Barak made that offer, and everybody thought that was off the charts too much, and they wouldn't even look at that. They wouldn't even look at that.
Yep.
But, you know, the next one says, whereas the United States government remains steadfastly committed to the security of Israel. We do. And it says especially its ability to maintain secure, recognized, and defensible borders. And then we say, whereas the United States government is resolutely bound to its policy of preserving and strengthening the capability of Israel to deter enemies and defend itself against any threat. Look, we're committed to Israel. That doesn't mean we hate the Arabs.
Right.
We don't. We love moderate Arabs who are willing to sit down and negotiate, not just with Israel, but with us. And we want to encourage more moderation in those areas. But you don't throw your ally under the bus.
We mentioned the allies. You've got Jordan, that has had some unrest, but very minor compared to the rest of the region because they've got a very stable government, very friendly to the West.
Well, and Egypt has been a great help for stabilization
and
in the Middle East.
And the question's going to be what's going to happen with Egypt.
And we don't know what's going to happen there. We have high hope that Egypt will be even better. But there's no use kidding. Mubarak was a friend of the Middle East and helped to stabilize the Middle East in many ways.
What possesses an administration to engage at this level when all of this is going on?
Some people really believe that the president is not that big a friend of Israel.
Yeah.
And that my personal belief is that he wants to be the great peacemaker, and it'd be wonderful if he could be. And that he's trying to cater to the Arab community, hoping that statements like he made will get them to come to the table. But You saw the Palestinians immediately attacked his statement.
Oh, yeah. In fact, we were picking that up today, right?
Yeah, right. And why you talk about 1967 when we should be talking about 1948? That was Hamas, and Palestinian Authority won't give up the right of return issue at all. I would ask that we give a lot of support to the Palestinian Authority, and they enter this agreement with Hamas. We train their security forces with our troops. You know, if did they not realize? I mean, we have to work with them as a U.S. government. Did they not realize that they put all of that in jeopardy when the American people started paying attention to this? That all of the infrastructure we built for them, and they go and make a voluntary agreement with an organization we classify at the State Department as a terrorist organization?
That's certainly a point that has to be made. I mean, how do you deal with terrorist organizations who won't even come to the table, whose stated aim is to make sure that Israel doesn't have a right to exist, and whose additional stated aim is they're going to get rid of Israel, and if they have to kill all the Israelis, they would.
So the next paragraph, the next statement says, whereas the United Nations Security Council Resolution 242, 1967, recognized Israel's, quote, right to live in peace within secure and recognized boundaries, free from threats or acts of force. There have been incursions in the last 10 years. You've had the intifadas that have taken place, but you've not had mass war. You haven't had a 1973 war. You haven't had a 67 war.
Well, by the way, Israel didn't attack them.
Correct.
I mean, in either of those wars.
Correct. They were the ones being
attacked.
Here's my question. The president talked about this land swaps. Now, some are speculating what happens to Jerusalem, which is such an emotionally charged issue for the Israeli people. They're not going to surrender half of Jerusalem, which puts the holy sites completely in the control, basically, of the Palestinian Authority and Hamas, their partner.
What the president was suggesting is the whole Western Wall section would go to the Arabs, and they could keep the Israelis from this very sacred place that I've been to. And
I know, and you're a man of deep faith. How? I mean, for all of us. I mean, I am as well, Jordan. I mean, under the control of these other governments, we're not going to see the religious freedom that you see there right now, where all of the faiths of Abraham practice freely without any problem.
That's right. And, well, you know, the president has tried to come off of what he said, and I appreciate that. But what he said has caused a tremendous furor, a tremendous amount of problems, and it's given hope to the terrorist parts of the Arab nations. And that's not where we want to be.
You've got this concurrent resolution. You've got bipartisan support. But what do you want to see come out of the president at this point, in this very juncture we're in right now?
Well, he tried to formally retract it, as you know, and I don't feel did a very good job of retracting it. It shouldn't have been said to begin with. That's easy to say. The fact is that I think we're going to have to. I think we're going to have the president really state in categorical terms that you know, Jerusalem has to remain free, and that the 1967, 1949 boundaries are not going to be binding here, and that land swaps is a heck of a poor way of talking about how you negotiate this, and to open the door for the Syrians to come down and take over the Golan Heights. I mean, from the Golan Heights, they could shell all of northern Israel.
Easily.
Artillery shell them. And I mean,
especially now with the artillery, the way it's changed.
Well, and with Hezbollah in Lebanon and Syria, and with the real troublemakers in the Middle East, Iran.
Right.
I mean, let's just be honest about it.
It is, at the end of the day, when we talk about asymmetrical warfare, which is what this is, it's Iran backing all of this. I mean, that's all the reports are indicating that. This is the
money
real
comes
problem.
from. That's where the weapons come from. That's where ultimately we're going to have to be concerned about nuclear weapons. And you know, I hear a lot of big talk about we cannot let Iran have nuclear weapons. Yeah. Well, what have we done about it? Not a doggone thing. And now I'm sure there's some behind-the-scenes maneuvering, but it's not going anywhere, and we know it. And you know, it's almost an insoluble problem at this particular point.
Iran's a real threat.
Yeah, it's a real threat to the whole world, and they're funding terrorism all over the world. And there's no secret that they funded some of the worst terrorism that has gone on in recent years.
Senator, thank you very much for being with us.
Nice to be with you.
It was great having Senator Hatch in the studio. He mentioned Iran and the involvement of Iran. That is part of this DVD full-length feature film we've done called The Export. Let me go ahead and play the trailer from that, which deals with this whole issue of Iran. Take a listen. How significant
is the conflict with radical Islam.
Radical Islam intends that all of us live under Sharia law. The enemy is radical Islam.
If Iran gets nuclear weapons, Saudi Arabia will, Egypt will, Turkey, perhaps others.
The moment the Iranians have nuclear weapons, they have a nuclear umbrella over their international terrorist capability.
That is a formula for insecurity.
And I'm telling you, target number one is Israel. The Israelis cannot abide that. It is truly an existential threat.
Peace can reign only when everybody comes under the umbrella of Islam.
These 40,000 rockets and missiles on the border with Lebanon could, be sprung and fired against Israel.
The more we have nuclear proliferation in the world, the more the risks are that there will be the availability of nuclear devices, the lethality of which is mind-boggling.
On every September 11, they fire rockets into Israel. Why? To commemorate 9/11.
A proposal to build a mosque and Islamic cultural center near Ground Zero, generating a lot of heat at a hearing in New York City. Opponents want to give landmark status to the 150-year-old building, which would essentially prevent the mosque and center from being built.
They don't want to just take this building and turn it into a mosque. They want a memorial. They want a monument.
A monument, a tower of triumph. That's what they want to build, called Cordoba.
Cordoba is the symbol of them conquering Christian land. I mean, that was not by accident.
They want America to be a Muslim nation.
This is a march of Sharia through our institutions. And what they're trying to do is see how far they can get before there's pushback. And as long as there's not pushback, they'll keep pushing.
If the mosque were allowed to go up and did go up, what symbol does that send?
We might as well just throw the Constitution away.
If we care about remaining the United States that I think we want to remain, we have to pay very close attention to this.
The war on terror is a war that has to be won every day.
All right, folks, here's what we're going to do. You've got a concurrent resolution of the United States Senate. We want you to support it, which basically says we're going to reject the 67 borders proposal, no negotiations with Hamas. We're going to make sure Jerusalem stays united. We want you to support the efforts of Senator Hatch and others, including our efforts to make sure Jerusalem stays the eternal, undivided capital of Israel. I want you to sign on this petition, and I'm going to send you the export DVD that you just saw an excerpt from. Make the call, sign on to that petition, and we'll send you the export DVD and the booklet on Sharia law. That's 877-989-2255. We'll talk to you next week.